Andrea Hay joins us live from the newsroom after hearing both sides today, delivering two different versions of the events that happened that night that Vander Heiden was killed. Andrea.
Kimmy and Bill, we learned today that the defense has no intention of arguing with prosecutors' extensive DNA evidence showing Burch was with and had sex with Nicole the night she was killed. The state says Burch picked up Vander Heiden outside a bar. She was drunk and her phone was dead. Burch's Google dashboard pinpoints him to 4 key places: where she was last seen, where she was murdered, to the place where her naked body was found, and then the overpass her clothing and purse were dumped and later recovered. They say injuries to her genitalia suggest she was sexually assaulted by Burch, whose DNA was all over her body. The state will call a forensic doctor to the stand.
When you hear Dr. Rogalska's testimony, you will have no doubt that when George did this to her, he intended to kill her. These are substantial, repeated physical injuries. There can be no doubt as to intent to kill.
Burch's defense attorney says he's not going to dispute DNA evidence, but he believes Vander Heiden's boyfriend, Doug Dietrich, had the motive to kill that his client did not.
On the night of her murder, Doug left Nicole with people she barely even knew so that he could speak to other girls and snort amphetamines with a friend. You're going to learn that on the night of Nicole's murder, she texted Doug, "You're an abusive. Why do you always hurt me?"
After opening statements, the prosecution jumped right into witness testimony, starting from the beginning, talking to key witnesses who actually found Vander Heiden's body in the field and called 911. Richard Vander Heiden is first to take the witness stand on May 21st, 2016. He, along with 2 boys, were picking rocks in a Bellevue field.
Out in here.
When Vander Heiden says he saw something in the brush.
Then I was kind of looking and I said, the boys were further that way from me. He said, is that a dead deer down there?
We are not identifying the now 13 and 15-year-old boys as ordered by Judge John Zakowski. One of them telling the jury, quote, "I just saw white, so I thought it was like the belly of a deer, but he soon realized it was a body," saying, quote, "It was on its stomach and I could see part of its face and hair."
Well, I was kind of shocked, but I thought, I just said, get the hell out of here. You don't need to be seeing that.
Vander Heiden says he called police, and Brown County Sergeant Carl Lau was first to arrive.
I observed what appeared to be a female body. She was laying naked. Face was all bloody. Her hair was covered in blood.
Within minutes, law enforcement blocked off the entire area, along with Vander Heiden's home, where authorities believe she was killed. Deputy Charles Tusso was tasked with documenting evidence, including blood, hair, and a piece of wire believed to be the murder weapon.
They had it already marked with like scaled evidence tents, so they asked me and Deputy Adams to photograph all the evidence and then document all the evidence that they had marked out there.
Burch's testimony continues as we speak. It'll likely not wrap up for another hour or more. As we know from reading paperwork filed before this trial even began, Burch's defense claims Burch was having sex with Vander Heiden outside of her home in a car when her boyfriend, Doug Dietrich, caught them and killed her. Burch claims Dietrich knocked him in the head and threatened him with a gun. Burch did not have any marks on his head that day, however, nor does Dietrich own a handgun. On the stand, Burch testifies he's instructed to pick up Vander Heiden's lifeless body and place it in the Blazer he's borrowing from his friends. He says the man with the gun gets into the back seat and tells him where to drive and dump the body.
I could see the reflection in the mirror because I couldn't physically turn around and look at him.
And again, at that point, did you know who that individual was?
Never seen him before in my life.
Do you know who that individual is now?
Now I do.
Who was it?
It was Doug Dietrich.
We'll hear more from Burch on the stand tonight at 5, 6, and 10. Back to you.
The verdict reads as follows. We, the jury, find the defendant, George Stephen Burch, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. As you just heard minutes ago, a jury of 12 handed down a guilty verdict against George Burch, charged with the brutal murder of Nicole Vanderheiden.
Their few hours of deliberation wrapped up 9 days of testimony and those closing arguments made by both sides just earlier today.
Now the defense claimed it was a crime of passion committed by Vanderheiden's boyfriend, Doug Dietrich, who forced Burch to get rid of her dead body after he caught them having sex. But on top of all the DNA and cell phone evidence against Burch, prosecutors say Dietrich's text messages and demeanor show Vanderheiden's boyfriend didn't care enough to commit murder. He wasn't mad. The district attorney even calls him Drunk Doug, a guy whose girlfriend is mad at him and he laughs it off and passes out in bed, not knowing where she is. Prosecutors say the motive for Burch was rape, and there's no way Vanderheiden chose to have sex with him outside her house in his car. The next day, Burch went fishing and didn't tell anyone about the murder.
That is the man that killed Nicole Vanderheiden. The man that met this woman in a bar and admitted by his own account to dumping her body in that field looks like this the next day. Who does?
Again, George Burch found guilty of murder just moments ago. We're told his sentencing is going to happen on May 4th.
Through this hour, the top prosecutor in the case had praise for the jury after today's guilty verdict.
They did exactly what we asked them to do, which is use their reason, use their judgment, use logic, and they arrived at the correct conclusion. We think the outcome is fair. Our heart goes out to Nicole Vanderheiden's family, to her friends, to the people that loved her. Obviously, getting justice here today certainly doesn't bring back Nikki, doesn't end that loss for them.
Took jurors about 3 hours this afternoon to reach their unanimous decision.
The Brown County District Attorney today was the most passionate we have ever seen him in the course of this trial, getting up, standing, yelling, swearing, and calling George Burch disgusting. George Burch claims he and Vanderheiden met at a bar and agreed to have sex.
In his consensual fantasy encounter that he had in the back of that car. Because that's what he told you. Her pants were off, her legs were up, we were having a great time. No, that's disgusting. It's harmful to her reputation, it's offensive, and it's untrue. That's not what happened. What happened is he forced himself on her, and she struggled, and it hurt, and it caused her to bleed.
Burch claims Vanderheiden's boyfriend caught them and knocked him out.
6'7", 260-pound George Burch knocked out cold by something that didn't even create a mark in his head. 16 different spots on her body where George Burch's DNA is present and Doug Dietrich's DNA is excluded.
The defense says Dietrich made Burch carry her dead body.
George Burch explained that he was having consensual sex with Miss Vanderheiden, that he had to carry her body to that field. That explains why his DNA was on Nicole.
Lasee calls Dietrich Drunk Doug and says he wasn't mad enough to commit murder, even after Vanderheiden sent him a barrage of angry messages.
Doug's responses, LOL, Nikki, knock it off. Call me, please. Right? And that's after Nikki sends a slew of text messages. He wasn't very attentive, that's for sure. When did he flip into this jealous, rageful, horrible individual? That is the man that killed Nicole Vanderheiden. The man that met this woman in a bar and admitted by his own account to dumping her body in that field looks like this the next day. Who does that? Who looks like this the next day? This is him the next day, not calling the police, not telling anybody about it. That's him the next day.
After 9 days of testimony, countless witnesses, and closing arguments, jurors Rachel, Hillary, and Ashley Hale tell us what happened during deliberations Thursday afternoon.
Everyone was pretty much on the same page going through everything. We were essentially just trying to make sure that we weren't missing anything.
About an hour in, the jury asked to review evidence.
We wanted to match the cords to see if the cords from Dietrich's garage matched the cord that was used.
George Burch tried to pin the death on boyfriend Douglas Dietrich, but when those cords didn't match the murder weapon, Hillary and Hale say the evidence led them to Burch.
I thought that his story was far too detailed in the places that was convenient and lacked significant detail in the other places. So I thought that was all a story.
There was times, I will admit, I was convinced or we're going back and forth, but there's just the evidence, and you know, you want to have a heart and don't want to send someone the guilty plea, but in the end, the evidence was there.
Hillary and Hale have never been part of a jury before and admit at times it was difficult to sit through, especially showing Vander Heiden's bloody clothes.
I'm talking myself down because, you know, Nicole's family is right there, and you're trying not to get emotional because they have to see that, and I don't think it was fair to them that they had to see that.
It was definitely hard to see the injuries, and having the family in the courtroom, it was hard to maintain your composure when seeing how they're reacting. But we were, I think, as a group, able to stay fair and impartial and come to the right decision.
A decision they both hope brings a little closure to Vander Heiden's family and friends.
I think we'd all like to know what really happened. There's still a lot of holes in the story, and we feel for the family that they'll never truly know what really happened. But hopefully they have some closure now.
He had called me up and said that he had just gotten out of jail because his wife had him arrested and they were going through divorce and had no place to go, no money, no nothing.
Ed Jackson considered Burch a longtime friend and fishing buddy from his former life in upstate New York. Hearing his friend had fallen on hard times, he and Linda bought him a ticket to Wisconsin from Virginia to restart his life, as they'd done many times for friends and family. They gave him a room in their house, added a phone to their plan, and let him use one of their cars. Their generosity turns to regret within months as he's arrested for murder. And they find out he's hidden his serious criminal past from them during the decades they'd lived several states away. Last month, the Jacksons testified before a jury explaining why they'd brought him here and his behavior following Vander Heiden's murder.
Apparently from the day he was here, it was nothing but a lie.
It's serious when you know that somebody that was capable of doing something like that was living under your roof, and you trusted him with everything that was valuable, your house, your father-in-law, your dogs.
26 pages of letters put into George Burch's folder. And basically, these are all people who wrote in and said, please do not give him the option for parole. He gets an automatic life sentence. He may or may not get the option for parole. These people say, please, not even if he's 90 years old, do I want him out on the streets.
Life without parole, to ensure that the punishment fits the crime.
Well, Judge Zakowski says the 241 injuries to Vander Heiden's body are telling because they were only committed by one person, George Burch. He says Burch is not human for stomping and kicking Vander Heiden in the head. Though the death penalty was abolished in the state of Wisconsin in the 1800s, the judge believes if it were legal here, Burch should have gotten it.
But you know, this is a crime against a child. It's a crime against Mr. and Mrs. Vander Heiden's child. It's a crime against Nikki's children. It's severe, it's brutal, it's a crime against children. The answer is yes, Mr. Burch. This is a crime that would, I believe, merit the death penalty, and for that you have to die in prison.
After inviting Nicole Vander Heiden's family to speak on her behalf, her mom, dad, sister, and boyfriend's mother looked George Burch in the eyes and told him what he took from them.
I have a hard time driving on Hoffman Road, the site where Burch threw Nikki away like she didn't even matter. She did matter. We loved her and we miss her.
Judge Zakowski offered the same opportunity to friends and family of Burch, but no one talked on his behalf.
Which in some ways is sad and maybe telling.
Burch himself had nothing to say.
No, sir, Your Honor.
Judge Zakowski disappointed with that answer.
You know, I just a thought, Mr. Burch. He said yes, sir, and no, sir. The manly thing would have been to say, I did it, I flipped out, I did whatever. Cop a plea, do something, and step up to the plate, and you chose not to do that. You still haven't done that.
Judge Zakowski even talks about Burch's activities the day after the murder, questioning his humanity.
Drop the body off in a field, and then 12 hours later go on a boat and be smiling like nothing happened. Like you didn't have a care in the world. How can we explain that? That isn't human. That is not normal.
Judge Zakowski sentenced Burch to life behind bars without parole with one more condition.
Mr. Burch, you're not to profit at all from anything that might somehow come about because of this case. It's already gotten all kinds of national publicity. Write a book, have a movie, whatever. Any monies goes to the Dietrich and Vanderheiden families. Nobody profits because of this kind of brutality.
In Brown County, Brittany Schmidt, Action 2 News.